This is Michael Coffey, pastor of First English Lutheran Church in Austin, Texas. And this is another Tiny Desk sermon. This is a first look at the readings for the coming Sunday and some impromptu reflections on them. This coming Sunday, which is November 26th, is Christ the King Sunday, or the Reign of Christ Sunday. It is a recent addition to the liturgical calendar of the Church. It was added in 1925 by the then Pope. And it is not one of my favorite days in the church year, but I want to explore why. And the reason why is also a reason to observe it. The text for this year on Christ the King Sunday is from Matthew 25. We've been hearing a whole series of texts from Matthew 25 the last few weeks. It's a difficult chapter about the coming reign of Christ and the messages of being ready for it, the messages of using your talents in life now, and then the judgment of the Gentiles or the nations. I'm not going to read the whole text, but you'll recognize it once I get into it. Starting at verse 31, when the Son of Man came in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at his right hand and the goats at his left. And then the king will say to those at his right hand, Come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food, and I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry, and gave you food, or thirsty, and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you? And the king will answer them, Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me. The parable goes on then to give the reverse message to the goats who did not feed or shelter or visit or take care of the people mentioned in the first half, and they are judged for not doing that. And they said, when didn't we do this for you? And he says, when you didn't do it to the least of these who are members of my family or my brothers, which the Greek text says. It's a very famous parable. It's frequently quoted. I think it's a often mostly misunderstood parable, which I don't have time to quite explain why, but it certainly does tell us something about the reign of Christ. What is the reign of Christ like? And in particular, what is the reign of Christ, Christ as King? What is a Jesus administration like? It is quite different from earthly kings, earthly presidents, earthly governances, because they tend to focus on and identify with the powerful, the wealthy, leaders who keep themselves in positions of power and status. And this king identifies with the poor and the hungry and the sick and the imprisoned and the naked, and has such an identification with them that to care for those is to serve that king. So the reason I often don't like Christ the King Sunday is that in a Western culture where Christianity is dominant and where triumphalism has often been the way the church has existed in the world, it can sound like a time to celebrate the rule of power over others. And too often that's how the church has existed in the world. Now, the development of this holiday, this feast day, is really for opposite reasons. It came about when it did because of the beginning of the rise of nationalism and of powers of early fascism in Europe and things like this. But it's just not easily heard the right way, so we have to listen to the text to get what the day means. For us today, we have to understand that we are called to live under different reigns, different governances. We live under whatever worldly powers we exist, but as people of faith, baptized into Christ, we live under the one rule, the one reign, the one administration that really determines who we are and how we live in the world, which is the reign of Christ. So we live as that compassion of Jesus in the world. In fact, even though we live under two different realms, right now, the reign of Christ, a reign, a governance, a kingdom we keep awaiting to be fulfilled. Right now, it exists in the world by those who believe in it and those who dare live it out. Those who live out this vision that Jesus gives of what it means to live God's love in this world right now. And we know doing that is difficult, is easy, bumps up against the other governances and administrations and kings of this world, and there's often a price to pay. At the same time, I was just talking with someone earlier about showing kindness, compassion, love, mercy. And when you live with the love of God in you, there is nothing easier and nothing more joyful than showing love, kindness, compassion, and mercy. The roadblocks are gone, and you can't help yourself but be that kind of person. That's how Christ reigns in the world, is through those who trust enough in his message of love to live it in this world of many other competing governances. And I'll leave it at that. Peace to all.